My name is Bernadette Maxwell, and I am 32 years old. For most of my life, I lived in the shadow of my younger sister, Cassandra. She was always the golden child, the perfect daughter who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. While I was forgotten, overlooked, and eventually pushed out of our family furniture business, Maxwell's Fine Furniture. After years of no contact, I received a call yesterday that I never expected. Cassandra's voice was desperate as she begged for my help. The family business is falling apart and suddenly they need me. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever felt overlooked by your family, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in what appeared to be the picture-perfect American family. My father Thomas and mother Judith started Maxwell's Fine Furniture when I was just a baby. Some of my earliest memories are of the sawdust smell that clung to my father's flannel shirts when he came home from the workshop, and the sound of my mother on the phone with clients, her voice shifting into what we called her business tone. Our family home was filled with beautiful handcrafted furniture that Dad made himself. I loved running my fingers along the smooth oak dining table, tracing the grain patterns that Dad had taught me to appreciate. "This is the soul of the wood," he would say. "Each piece tells its own story." Those rare moments when he shared his passion with me are treasures in my memory. Everything changed when my sister Cassandra was born. I was only 2 years old, but even in my earliest memories, I can feel the shift in our family dynamic. Cassandra was a beautiful baby with golden curls and bright blue eyes that seemed to enchant everyone around her. My mother would parade her around the furniture showroom, and customers would coo and ah. "She looks like a little angel," they would say while I stood quietly to the side clutching my sketchbook. As we grew older, the differences in how we were treated became more obvious. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, my parents would nod and say, "That's nice, Bernadette." But when Cassandra brought home a B+, there would be celebrations and ice cream and endless praise about how smart she was. "She doesn't even have to try," my mother would tell her friends on the phone. "She's just naturally brilliant." I developed an early interest in design and woodworking just like my father. I would spend hours in his workshop after school watching him work and asking questions. Sometimes he would let me help with small tasks, and I treasured those moments. But more often he would become absorbed in his work and forget I was there. When Cassandra would burst in, however, everything would stop. Dad would put down his tools immediately to swing her up in his arms or listen to her stories about school. My mother was even worse. Judith Maxwell was obsessed with appearances and social status. She was always pushing me to be more like Cassandra. "Why can't you smile more like your sister?" she would ask. "Cassandra knows how to work a room. You just stand there like a statue." She criticized everything from my posture to my quieter personality. "No one notices wallflowers, Bernadette," was one of her favorite sayings. By high school, I had found my niche in art and design classes. My art teacher, Mrs. Wilson, was the first person who seemed to truly see my potential. She entered my furniture design in a statewide competition, and I won first place. I rushed home with my blue ribbon, excited to finally have something my parents might be proud of. But when I got there, the house was empty except for a note saying they had gone to watch Cassandra's debate team practice. My award ended up in my desk drawer, never mentioned. Family gatherings were exercises in invisibility. Aunts, uncles, and grandparents would flock around Cassandra asking about her latest achievements while I set the table or helped in the kitchen. "Bernadette is our quiet one," my mother would explain, as if being thoughtful was some kind of deficiency. My father would nod in agreement, his eyes following Cassandra as she charmed the room. To understand my family, you need to know who they really are beneath the perfect facade. My father Thomas built the business from nothing, and it consumed him. He was respected in the community, but at home he was distant and preoccupied, only truly animated when discussing business or when Cassandra managed to capture his attention. My mother Judith was the social director, obsessed with how the Maxwell family was perceived. She was always pushing for more connections, more status, more perfection. And Cassandra learned early how to manipulate this dynamic. She was charismatic and knew exactly how to play to our parents' expectations, while subtly ensuring I remained in the background. The final straw of my childhood came on my 18th birthday. I came downstairs that morning to find no cards, no presents, not even a happy birthday from either parent. They were both busy discussing Cassandra's Sweet 16 party that was happening in 2 weeks. My mother had hired an event planner and was turning our backyard into a fairy tale wonderland. When I quietly reminded them it was my birthday, my mother looked startled. "Oh, that's right. Happy birthday, dear. Would you mind picking up Cassandra's dress from the tailor today? I'm swamped with party details." My father barely looked up from his newspaper. That night, I ate a cupcake alone in my room and made a promise to myself that someday I would build a life where I mattered. Getting accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design should have been a turning point. It was one of the top schools for furniture design in the country, and my portfolio had impressed the admissions committee enough to earn me a spot. When the acceptance letter came, I ran to my father's study, hoping this achievement in his own field would finally make him proud. "Dad, I got into RISD," I said, holding out the letter. He glanced up from his desk, took the letter, and scanned it quickly. "That's going to be expensive, Bernadette. You know we're putting money aside for Cassandra's education. She'll be applying to business schools in a couple of years." And that was it. No congratulations. No pride. Just a reminder that even my education was secondary to my sister's future. I ended up piecing together scholarships and student loans, but it wasn't enough. Throughout college, I worked 3 jobs: mornings at a coffee shop, evenings, waiting tables, and weekends at a small furniture restoration shop, where I could at least use some of what I was learning. I lived on ramen noodles and caffeine, sleeping only 4 or 5 hours a night to keep up with my coursework. But despite the exhaustion, I felt free for the first time in my life. I was in a place where my designs and ideas mattered. During my sophomore year, I met Amanda in a design history class. She was the first real friend I'd ever had, someone who saw me for who I was, rather than as Cassandra's forgettable older sister. We were studying together in my tiny apartment when my mother called. I put the phone on speaker as I continued sketching. "Bernadette, wonderful news. Cassandra was just elected student body president." My mother's voice was giddy with excitement. "That's great, Mom," I said, not looking up from my work. "You should call and congratulate her." "Oh, and we need to change your flight home for Thanksgiving. We're having a special dinner for some of your father's business associates to meet Cassandra, so we need you home a day early to help set up." Amanda raised her eyebrows as I hung up. "Do they ever ask about what you're doing?" she asked. I shrugged. "Not really. That's just how it is." "That's not normal, Bernie. You know that, right?" No one had ever suggested that before, that there was something wrong with my family, not with me. It was a revelation that took time to fully absorb. The holiday visits home became increasingly painful. I would arrive to find my childhood bedroom transformed into a storage room for Cassandra's overflow of clothes and trophies. I would sleep on an air mattress while listening to my parents fawn over Cassandra's latest accomplishments. During dinner conversations, I might as well have been invisible. If I tried to share news about my projects or classes, I would be interrupted, or the subject would quickly shift back to Cassandra or the business. In my junior year, I was fortunate enough to take a master class with Professor Elaine Hodges, a renowned furniture designer whose work I had admired for years. Unlike my parents, Elaine saw something in me. She pushed me to refine my techniques and develop my own aesthetic voice. After class one day, she asked me to stay behind. "Your piece for the final project is exceptional, Bernadette," she said. "But I notice you holding back sometimes, as if you're afraid to fully express your vision." I didn't know how to explain that expressing myself had never been encouraged in my family. Elaine seemed to understand without me saying it. She became a mentor, and in many ways the supportive parent figure I had always needed. She invited me to collaborative workshops, introduced me to industry contacts, and gave me honest feedback that helped me grow as a designer. "You have a gift for seeing the potential in materials that others discard," she told me once. "That's rare and valuable. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." When graduation day finally arrived, I was filled with a mix of pride and anxiety. Would this be the day my parents finally saw my value? I had won the department's Outstanding Achievement Award, and my thesis project, a modular shelving system that transformed based on the user's needs, was going to be featured in a national design magazine. My parents arrived an hour late to the ceremony, missing my walk across the stage. When I found them afterward, my mother was checking her watch. "We need to leave soon," she said, barely looking at my diploma. "Cassandra's induction into the Business Honors Society is at 4, and it's a 40-minute drive." "But the department reception is starting now," I said. "They're displaying our thesis projects. I wanted to show you mine." "You can send us pictures, dear," my mother replied, already turning away. My father gave my shoulder an awkward pat and followed her. They never saw my award-winning design in person. They never heard my professors talk about my potential. And they never knew that I had already received a job offer from Innovate Designs, a small but cutting-edge furniture design firm in Seattle. When I told them about the job a week later, their reaction was predictable. "But we assumed you'd come work for Maxwell's," my father said, frowning. "Cassandra will be graduating in 2 years, and you two could learn the business together." "What would you even do there?" my mother asked. "The design work is all outsourced now. We need someone to manage the showroom floor." "They've offered me a position as a junior designer," I explained. "I would be creating original pieces, not selling furniture or managing a store." "And how much are they paying you for this designer position?" my father asked, making air quotes around the word designer. When I told him, he laughed. "We could pay you more to work here." "No, you couldn't," I said, finding my voice. "Because what they're offering me isn't just money, it's respect. Recognition of my talent, a chance to create something meaningful. When have you ever offered me that?" The argument that followed was ugly. Years of hurt and resentment came pouring out of me while my parents looked shocked, as if they had no idea why I might be upset. My mother accused me of being dramatic and ungrateful. My father retreated into stony silence. "Cassandra would never speak to us this way," my mother finally said. "She understands family loyalty." That was the moment I knew I had to leave. Not just the house, but this toxic family dynamic entirely. I went upstairs and packed my things, filling my old Honda Civic with everything I cared about. As I carried the last box down, my mother stood in the hallway. "If you leave like this, don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms," she said, arms crossed. "I've never had open arms to come back to," I replied. My father was in his study, door closed as usual. I hesitated outside it, wondering if I should say goodbye. In the end, I just left. He never came out to stop me. Seattle welcomed me with rain and possibility. My apartment was tiny, a studio with barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. The windows overlooked a busy street with a coffee shop on the corner and a small park 2 blocks away. I would sit by the window during those first few months, watching people hurry by with umbrellas and rain jackets, and feel both completely alone and oddly free. Innovate Designs was everything Maxwell's wasn't. Instead of my father's traditional heavy wood pieces that hadn't changed in style for decades, Innovate created furniture that pushed boundaries. They combined materials in unexpected ways, glass with reclaimed wood, metal with soft fabrics, all while maintaining functionality and beauty. My boss, Leo, was a former architect who believed that furniture should be both art and utility. "Design is problem-solving with soul," he would say during our team meetings. "What problem does this piece solve, and how does it speak to the person using it?" My first year was hard. I was starting at the bottom, making less money than I had anticipated. Some nights I would eat peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and worry about making rent. But unlike college, where the struggle had been lonely and thankless, this struggle had purpose. Each design I contributed to, each prototype I helped build, was a step toward the future I wanted. Slowly, I developed my own style. I was drawn to adaptive designs, furniture that could transform or serve multiple functions. I found beauty in efficiency and sustainability, using materials that others overlooked. My first solo project was a coffee table made from salvaged boat wood with hidden compartments and surfaces that could be reconfigured based on the user's needs. When Leo approved it for production, I felt a surge of validation that no amount of parental approval could have matched. At work, I found the sense of belonging I had always craved. My colleagues Zach, a former sculptor with tattooed arms and endless patience for teaching me new techniques, and Sophia, our marketing director, who fought to get my designs highlighted in the company's catalog, became the family I chose. We would work late together ordering takeout and solving design problems until the cleaning crew kicked us out. On weekends, they introduced me to Seattle, showing me hidden neighborhoods and hole-in-the-wall restaurants that made the city feel like home. I avoided news about my biological family, but it was impossible to miss entirely. Maxwell's Fine Furniture had a social media presence, and occasionally their posts would appear on my feed. I saw the grand opening of their second location with Cassandra cutting a ribbon in front of a sleek new storefront. My father's quotes in industry publications about expanding the Maxwell legacy. My mother hosting design events where other people's creativity was showcased in their showroom. It should have hurt seeing them thrive without me, but instead, it reinforced that I had made the right choice. The furniture in their promotional photos was nothing like what my father had once crafted by hand. It was mass-produced trendy, without substance, designed to be replaced rather than treasured. They had sacrificed quality for quantity, just as they had sacrificed one daughter's happiness for another's pedestal. As I approached my third year in Seattle, I met Marcus. He was a regular at my corner coffee shop, always sitting at the same table with his laptop. We had smiled at each other for weeks before he finally introduced himself. He was an environmental engineer working on sustainable building projects with kind eyes and a laugh that made me feel warm inside. Our first date lasted 6 hours, neither of us wanting it to end. Our second ended with a kiss that felt like coming home. By our fifth date, I was telling him things I had never told anyone about my family, my insecurities, my fears. Instead of judgment, he offered understanding. It sounds like they couldn't see past their own expectations to appreciate who you actually are, he said. That's their loss, Bernie, a huge one. With Marcus's encouragement, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Jenkins. In those weekly sessions, I began to unpack the layers of hurt and rejection that had shaped my sense of self. Dr. Jenkins helped me understand that I wasn't asking for too much in wanting my parents' love and recognition. I was asking for the bare minimum that any child deserves. You cannot control whether your parents ever recognize their behavior, Dr. Jenkins told me. But you can control how much power you give those experiences over your present happiness. Setting boundaries was the hardest lesson. For years, I had answered every holiday text with a polite response, sent obligatory birthday cards, and deflected the occasional probing questions about when I might come home to visit. Dr. Jenkins helped me see that these interactions were keeping me tethered to hopes that only left me disappointed. What would happen if you didn't respond immediately? If you waited until you actually wanted to engage, rather than feeling obligated? It was terrifying at first, but also liberating. I stopped dropping everything when a Maxwell family text came through. I declined the superficial invitation to my parents' 30th anniversary party. I focused instead on building the life and relationships that actually nourished me. 5 years after leaving Portland, I received an industry award for a collection of multi-purpose furniture designed for small urban apartments. The recognition came with a feature in a prominent design magazine and inquiries from several larger companies. The night of the award ceremony, Zach, Sophia, Marcus, and even my old professor Elaine flew in to celebrate with me. As I looked around at their beaming faces, I realized I had created something my childhood self would never have believed possible, a life where I was valued, supported, and loved. That night, after everyone had gone home and Marcus was asleep beside me, I checked my email one last time. There, among the congratulatory messages and business inquiries, was an email from Cassandra. The subject line read simply, "Saw your award. Congratulations." I almost deleted it without reading further, but curiosity won out. The message was brief. "I always knew you were the talented one. Hope you're well." I closed my laptop without replying, but the message lingered in my mind. It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged my success. I wasn't ready to respond, but for the first time I wondered if Cassandra might be more than the golden child who had contributed to my unhappiness. Perhaps she too was caught in our parents' dysfunctional web. The first sign that something was changing came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was reviewing prototypes for our new line when my phone buzzed with a text from an unsaved number. I almost ignored it, but the preview caught my eye. "Bernie, it's Cass. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing." I stared at my phone, coffee growing cold in my hand. In 5 years, Cassandra had never reached out directly like this. My first instinct was suspicion. What did she want? Was this some kind of manipulation? I showed the message to Marcus that evening. "You don't have to respond," he reminded me. "But if you're curious, keep it light and see what happens." I sent a brief reply. "I'm well, busy with work. Hope you're doing okay too." Her response came almost immediately. "So glad to hear that I've been following your career from afar. That cedar and glass bookshelf you designed is incredible. Would love to catch up sometime if you're ever open to it." The exchange left me unsettled. Was this the same sister who had soaked up all the oxygen in our family home? Who had watched me be overlooked and dismissed without ever speaking up? Who had taken her place as the heir to Maxwell's while I was pushed aside? I decided not to pursue the conversation further, but I didn't block her number either. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through industry news when an article caught my eye. "Maxwell's Fine Furniture opens 5th location amid expansion." The accompanying photo showed my father and Cassandra cutting a ribbon in front of a sleek storefront in Boise. My mother stood to the side, beaming with pride. They looked successful, triumphant even. But something in my father's eyes gave me pause. He looked tired, the smile not quite reaching his eyes. I clicked through to the company website, something I hadn't done in years. The About Us page now featured Cassandra prominently described as Chief Operations Officer and the future of Maxwell's Fine Furniture. A video showed her giving a tour of their Portland flagship store, gesturing to rows of furniture that looked nothing like the handcrafted pieces my father once made with such care. Everything was uniform, trendy, but soulless designs that could have come from any mass-market retailer. "At Maxwell's, we're expanding our vision while honoring our heritage of quality," Cassandra said to the camera, reciting what was clearly a scripted line. But industry forums told a different story. In a private design community I belonged to, there were threads about quality issues with recent Maxwell's pieces. "Veneer peeling within months," one designer complained. "Joints failing after minimal use," wrote another. "Nothing like what Thomas Maxwell used to create." The expansion seemed to be happening at the expense of the craftsmanship that had once been the company's foundation. I closed my laptop, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. The business my father had built with his hands was becoming a hollow version of itself. It shouldn't have mattered to me. I had built my own life, my own success. But some small part of me mourned for what Maxwell's had once represented. That same week, I received news that buoyed my spirits and pushed thoughts of my family to the background. Leo called me into his office and offered me a promotion to lead designer with my own collection under the Innovate brand. "Your work has been our best-selling line for the past 2 years," he said. "It's time you had the title and creative control to match your contribution." I threw myself into developing this collection, working late into the night, sketching concepts and refining designs. This was what I had always wanted: the freedom to create on my own terms, with support rather than criticism. The weeks blurred together in a happy haze of creativity and purpose. Then the messages from Cassandra began increasing in frequency. At first, they were casual updates or comments on my professional social media posts. Then they became more personal, reminiscing about childhood memories I had almost forgotten, moments when it had been just the two of us building forts in the backyard or sneaking cookies from the kitchen. She seemed to be carefully selecting memories that didn't include our parents, as if trying to establish a connection separate from them. I responded minimally, still wary of her motives, but I couldn't deny a flicker of curiosity. Had Cassandra changed? Or was this another performance like the ones she had perfected growing up to ensure she remained the center of attention? My wariness deepened when I received a call from Jamie, a childhood friend who still lived in Portland. "Have you spoken to your family recently?" she asked, her voice careful. "Not really. Why?" "I ran into your mom at the grocery store last week. She looked rough." When I asked how your dad was doing, she got really evasive. There are rumors that he's having health problems, but no one knows for sure. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the Seattle skyline as the sun set, feeling conflicted. I had worked hard to create boundaries with my family to protect myself from their toxicity. But what if my father was seriously ill? Did I owe him anything? Did I owe myself the chance to resolve things before it was too late? That night, Marcus and I had a long conversation about toxic family relationships and the complexity of forgiveness. "You can't make this decision based on obligation," he said, holding my hand across our kitchen table. "You need to ask yourself what you actually want and what you can handle emotionally." "What if they need my help?" I asked. "Then that's their opportunity to approach you honestly and directly," he replied. "Not through Cassandra's cryptic texts or hometown gossip. You deserve transparency after everything they put you through." The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I used my design industry access to look up the latest financial reports and business news about Maxwell's Fine Furniture. What I found was concerning. Despite the expansion and glossy marketing, there were signs of financial strain. A business loan that had funded the newest locations, suppliers filing complaints about late payments, customer reviews that had steadily declined over the past year. Behind the facade of success, Maxwell's appeared to be in trouble. The rapid expansion had stretched their resources thin, and the quality issues were damaging their reputation. I thought about my father's tired eyes in that ribbon-cutting photo and wondered if the success story they were selling was as hollow as the furniture they now produced. Cassandra's social media told a completely different story. Her Instagram showed business awards, networking events, and aspirational lifestyle posts. "Another successful quarter," read a caption from just 2 weeks ago beneath a photo of champagne glasses being clinked over spreadsheets. It was the perfect facade, but I now suspected it was just that, a facade. Then came the voicemail that changed everything. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed, so I didn't see it until hours later. Cassandra's voice filled my ear, but it wasn't the confident, polished tone I had grown accustomed to. She sounded stressed, her words tumbling out quickly. "Bernie, I need to talk to you. It's about Mom and Dad and the business. They're not good. Please call me back when you can. Please." Her voice cracked on the final word, and for the first time since we were children, I heard genuine vulnerability from my golden sister. Something was very wrong at Maxwell's Fine Furniture, and apparently after all these years of not needing me, they needed me now. I waited until the next morning to return Cassandra's call. I needed time to prepare myself to remember the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. When I finally dialed her number, I had Marcus sit beside me, his hand on mine for support. Cassandra answered on the first ring. "Bernie, oh, thank God." "I got your message," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What's going on? I don't even know where to start." She sounded exhausted, nothing like the polished businesswoman from her social media. "Everything's falling apart." For the next hour, Cassandra unraveled the carefully constructed image of Maxwell's success. The expansion had been too aggressive, fueled by loans they couldn't realistically repay. Dad had insisted they could capture new markets, compete with the big box stores if they just moved quickly enough. Mom had been focused on the social prestige of having locations across multiple states rather than the financial realities. "I tried to tell them we needed to slow down," Cassandra said, her voice breaking. "The quality was suffering because we had to cut costs to fund the new locations. I kept saying we should focus on what made Maxwell special in the first place, but Dad wouldn't listen. And now, I prompted. We're 3 months behind on payments to our main suppliers. The bank is threatening to call in our loans. Customer complaints are piling up faster than we can address them." She paused. "Dad had a mild heart attack last month. The doctor says it was stress-related." I felt a jolt of concern despite myself. "Is he okay?" "Physically, yes. They put in a stent, but he's different, defeated. He spends most days just sitting in his office staring at the walls. And Mom," Cassandra let out a hollow laugh. "Mom's blaming everyone but herself. Mostly me, actually. That surprised me. You, but you're the golden child, the future of Maxwell's. There was a long silence before Cassandra responded, her voice small. I was never the golden child, Bernie. I was just the obedient one, the one who stayed and did what they wanted. And now that it's not working, I'm the one they blame. I didn't know what to say. This was a perspective I had never considered, that Cassandra might have been as trapped by our parents' expectations as I had been hurt by their neglect. I always envied you, she continued, the words seemingly surprising even her. You were so talented, so sure of what you wanted. Even when they couldn't see it, you knew your worth. I was just playing a part they created for me. Cassandra. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, and I could hear she was crying. I'm so sorry for everything, for not standing up for you when they treated you that way. For taking the spotlight even when I knew you deserved recognition. For letting you walk away without ever acknowledging how unfair it all was. Her apology hit me like a physical force. In all my imagined scenarios of reconnecting with my family, I had never pictured Cassandra taking responsibility like this. What do you want from me? I asked finally. Why are you telling me all this now? She took a deep breath. We need help, Bernie. Your help specifically. The only way Maxwell survives is if we completely reimagine what we're offering. Return to quality craftsmanship, but with modern design sensibility. Your design sensibility. And there it was. After years of dismissing my talent and pushing me aside, the family business needed the very skills they had once devalued. You want me to come back and design for Maxwell's, I said flatly. I want you to help save what's left of Dad's legacy, she corrected. I know we don't deserve your help. I know we're asking for more than we have any right to. But you're the only one who can do this. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, trying to process everything. Part of me felt vindicated they were finally recognizing what I could contribute. Another part felt angry that it took complete failure for them to value me. And a third part, smaller but persistent, wondered if this might be a chance to heal old wounds on my terms. What are you thinking? Marcus asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell them to figure it out themselves, but part of me cares what happens, he finished for me. Despite everything. I nodded. I need some advice. I called Elaine that afternoon. After hearing the full story, my mentor was characteristically direct. The question isn't whether you should help them, Bernadette. The question is what you need from this situation. Forgiveness can be a gift you give yourself, but it shouldn't come at the expense of your well-being. Dr. Jenkins had similar thoughts during our emergency session. Consider what closure would look like for you. If you engage with your family again, what boundaries will you need to maintain? What acknowledgement do you need from them for this to be a healing experience rather than reopening old wounds? After days of reflection, I made my decision. I would go to Portland and see the situation firsthand. I would listen to what my parents had to say, but I would not commit to anything until I was sure it wouldn't compromise the healthy life I had built. I'm coming with you, Marcus said when I told him my plan. You shouldn't have to face this alone. As I packed a small suitcase for the weekend trip, I felt a strange mix of dread and curiosity. What would it be like to walk back into the house where I had felt so invisible? Would my parents see me now, or would they still be looking past me to what I could do for them? And most importantly, was I strong enough now to face them on my own terms? The drive from Seattle to Portland felt both longer and shorter than its actual 3 hours. Each mile marker brought a fresh wave of anxiety mixed with resolve. Marcus drove while I stared out the window, watching the familiar landscape of the Pacific Northwest roll by endless evergreens and glimpses of water under a cloudy sky. We can turn around any time, Marcus reminded me as we crossed the Columbia River. Just say the word. But I knew I had to see this through, not for my parents or even for Cassandra, but for myself. for the closure I had never properly gained by simply driving away all those years ago. My childhood home looked smaller than I remembered the once immaculate garden, now showing signs of neglect. Paint peeled from the window frames and the grand maple tree in the front yard needed trimming. It was a physical manifestation of what Cassandra had described a family business and legacy in decline. She answered the door before we could knock, enveloping me in an awkward hug that I didn't quite return. Up close, Cassandra looked exhausted. The polished appearance from her social media was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she wore minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, dark circles visible beneath her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, stepping back to let us in. "Mom and Dad are in the living room." I introduced Marcus, and Cassandra led us through the familiar hallway lined with family photos. I noticed that my graduation photo, once tucked in a corner, was now prominently displayed alongside Cassandra's achievements. A recent addition, clearly. My mother rose when we entered the living room, her posture perfect as always, though her face showed new lines of stress. "Bernadette," she said formally, "you look well." Before I could respond, she continued eyeing my simple linen dress with the designer's eye that had always found me lacking. "Still favoring those shapeless styles, I see. You have such a nice figure if you'd just wear something more fitted." 5 minutes. It had taken less than 5 minutes for my mother to criticize me. Marcus squeezed my hand and I took a deep breath. "Hello, Mother. This is Marcus, my partner." She switched her attention to him, assessing his worth with a single glance. "An engineer. How practical. I suppose that's a stable career." My father remained seated in his armchair, looking smaller somehow. The heart attack had taken a toll, his robust frame now diminished, his once commanding presence subdued. When he finally looked at me, there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, a vulnerability that made my prepared defenses falter. "You came," he said simply. "I came to listen," I clarified. "That's all I'm promising right now." Dinner was a tense affair. My mother kept up a stream of superficial conversation, as if we were distant acquaintances rather than estranged family. She talked about neighbors and community events, carefully avoiding any mention of the business, or why I was really there. My father ate silently, occasionally glancing at me when he thought I wouldn't notice. "Should we discuss the actual reason Bernadette is here?" Cassandra finally interrupted one of our mother's stories about the garden club. "Cassandra, we don't need to get into all that unpleasantness at dinner," my mother replied sharply. "Yes, we do," Cassandra insisted. "Bernie didn't drive 3 hours to hear about Mrs. Peterson's prize-winning dahlias." My mother's face tightened. "Fine, if you insist on being so crass about it. Bernadette, the business is having some temporary difficulties. Your sister seems to think you might have some insights." "Temporary difficulties?" Cassandra echoed incredulously. "Mom, we're on the verge of bankruptcy. Stop pretending everything's fine." "If you had managed the expansion properly," my mother began. "If I had. It was Dad's idea to open 3 locations in 2 years. It was your idea to take out the second mortgage on this house to fund the Boise store. I told you both it was too much, too fast." I watched this exchange with growing understanding. The dynamic had shifted. Cassandra was now experiencing what I had lived with for years, bearing the blame for problems not of her making. The recognition must have shown on my face because Cassandra looked at me with a silent plea for understanding. "I'd like to see the store tomorrow," I said, interrupting their argument. "I need to understand what we're dealing with before I can offer any thoughts." My father spoke up for the first time in an hour. "I'll take you, first thing in the morning." The flagship store of Maxwell's Fine Furniture had changed dramatically since I had last seen it. Where once there had been carefully curated displays of handcrafted pieces, there were now rows of uniform trendy items that looked like they had come from a factory line, which Cassandra confirmed in a whispered aside they had. "We outsourced production to meet demand," she explained as we walked through the showroom. Dad fought it at first, but the board members we brought in during the expansion insisted it was the only way to scale. My father walked slightly ahead of us, his shoulders hunched. He stopped occasionally to straighten a display or wipe a fingerprint from a surface habits from decades of store ownership. These used to be his pride and joy, Cassandra continued. Now he can barely stand to look at them. Several longtime employees still worked there, and their reactions to seeing me were telling. Maria, who had been the office manager since I was a child, hugged me tightly. "The prodigal daughter returns," she said warmly. "And not a moment too soon. We need a Maxwell with vision around here." Even Greg, the workshop manager who had always favored Cassandra, shook my hand with genuine respect. "I've been following your career," he admitted. "That suspended desk system you designed last year was brilliant. Functional art, that's what we used to make here." As I examined the current inventory, the problems became clear. The furniture was derivative chasing trends rather than setting them. The quality was visibly inferior to what Maxwell's had once been known for, particle board cores instead of solid wood veneers, instead of hardwood surfaces hardware that was already coming loose on floor models. "Who's doing your design work now?" I asked. "We buy designs from a firm in China," Cassandra explained. "It's what all the mid-range furniture companies do now." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. They had pushed me away, convinced my design skills weren't valuable to the business, only to end up paying strangers for inferior work. That evening we had another family dinner, this time with just the four of us. The facade of pleasantry had dropped at least. My mother launched into criticisms of Cassandra almost immediately. "If you had focused on maintaining our relationships with the design community instead of chasing those expansion loans," she was saying, gesturing with her fork. "Quality is what built this business, and you've let it slip through your fingers." "That's not fair, Judith," my father said quietly. It might have been the first time I'd ever heard him contradict her. "Not fair. Look at what's happening, Thomas. We're weeks away from losing everything, and all she can suggest is bringing Bernadette back after she abandoned the family business when we needed her." "I didn't abandon anything," I said, my voice steady. "I was pushed out. You never wanted my input, my designs, or my presence. You made that abundantly clear." "That's ridiculous," my mother scoffed. "You were always so dramatic, so sensitive. We gave you every opportunity." "No, Mom," Cassandra interrupted. "Bernie's right. We both know it. You and Dad never supported her talent. You never even noticed it." My mother looked genuinely shocked at Cassandra turning against her. "After everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for Bernadette?" Marcus asked, his usual gentle tone hardened. "From what I can see, you rejected her gifts, minimized her achievements, and then expected her to be grateful for the opportunity to be overlooked in the family business." A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother opened and closed her mouth for once without a quick retort. My father stared down at his plate, his food barely touched. "I don't expect you to suddenly understand or acknowledge what happened," I said finally. "But I won't sit here and let you rewrite history. If you want my help now, it needs to be on new terms, with clear recognition of my value and expertise." I stood up from the table. "I'll be in my old room if anyone wants to have an actual conversation about the future of Maxwell's." As I climbed the stairs, I heard Cassandra's chair scrape back. "She's right," she said firmly, "and you both know it." Later that night, Cassandra knocked on my bedroom door. The room was still serving as storage, but someone had cleared enough space for the air mattress and some of my things. We sat together on the edge of the bed, two sisters who had been pitted against each other by their parents' dysfunctional dynamics. "I always knew," she said quietly. "How they treated you, I mean. I knew it was wrong." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked the question that had lingered for years. She looked down at her hands. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I wasn't perfect, if I didn't play the role they wanted, they would treat me the way they treated you. It was easier to go along with it." She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I know that makes me a coward." "We were kids, Cass. They were the adults. The responsibility was theirs, not yours." "But we're not kids anymore," she said. "And I've continued the pattern, haven't I? Taking credit, being the face of Maxwell's while knowing deep down that I don't have the vision to save it." We talked for hours, really talked perhaps for the first time in our lives, about growing up in the shadow of our parents' expectations, about the pressures Cassandra had faced as the perfect daughter always terrified of making a mistake, about my escape to Seattle and the life I had built there, about her growing awareness that the business model was unsustainable and her increasingly desperate attempts to convince our parents to change course. "They only started listening to me when it was too late," she said. "And even then, they wouldn't admit they were wrong. It was always someone else's fault: the economy, the competition, the changing market. Never their decisions." As dawn broke, I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness exactly, we had too many years of hurt for that to come easily, but understanding perhaps, and the possibility of a relationship separate from the toxic patterns our parents had created. Before I went to sleep, I walked past my father's study, noticing a light still on. The door was ajar, and I glimpsed him sitting at his desk, head in his hands. On an impulse, I knocked softly. "Dad?" He looked up, startled. "Bernadette, come in." I entered cautiously, taking in the familiar space that had always been off limits when I was young. The desk was covered in papers, financial statements, loan documents, threatening letters from suppliers. But what caught my eye was the corner of his desk, a folder labeled Bernadette's Designs. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. He followed my gaze and flushed slightly. "Just some things I kept over the years." I reached for the folder and opened it. Inside were printouts of my professional work, newspaper clippings of design awards I'd won, magazine features of my furniture lines. But beneath those were older sketches from my college days and even earlier, designs I had shown him that he had seemingly ignored, ideas I had offered that had been dismissed, all carefully preserved. "You kept these?" I asked, my voice catching. "Every one," he said quietly. "I always knew you were talented, Bernadette. More talented than I ever was." "Then why?" I couldn't finish the question, but I didn't need to. "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of showing favoritism. Afraid your mother would accuse me of undermining Cassandra. Afraid that if I encouraged you, you'd outshine me completely. It was easier to push you away than to face my own insecurities." He looked down at his hands, worn from years of craftsmanship before he became just a businessman. I was a coward. The admission hung in the air between us, too little and too late, yet somehow exactly what I needed to hear. Not that he hadn't seen me, but that he had been too afraid to acknowledge what he saw. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I want you to know I was always proud of you, even if I didn't have the courage to say it." I didn't forgive him that night. Some wounds take more than a single conversation to heal. But as I went back to the air mattress in my childhood room, I felt something I hadn't expected: the possibility that this trip might offer not just closure, but a new beginning. The next morning, I called a meeting at the store before opening hours. Everyone gathered in the showroom: my parents, Cassandra, Marcus, and the core staff who had been with Maxwell's for years. I had spent the early hours preparing, and now I stood in front of them with a clear vision and non-negotiable terms. "Maxwell's fine furniture is at a crossroads," I began. "You can continue down the current path and fail, or you can make radical changes and possibly survive. But those changes need to happen immediately, and they need to be comprehensive." I laid out exactly what had gone wrong. Quality sacrificed for quantity, craftsmanship abandoned for mass production, expansion prioritized over sustainability. I didn't soften the blow or spare feelings. This wasn't the time for the Maxwell family habit of avoiding hard truths. "If I'm going to help," I continued, "these are my conditions. First, complete honesty about the financial situation and acknowledgement of the mistakes that led us here. Second, I need full creative control over the new design direction. Third, I will not be leaving my position at Innovate Designs or moving back to Portland. My contribution will be as a consultant, not an employee." My mother's face tightened with each condition. "You always did think you knew better than everyone else," she said. "How exactly are you planning to save the business while keeping your fancy job in Seattle?" "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I've already spoken with Leo this morning. We've discussed the possibility of a collaboration between Innovate and Maxwell's. He sees potential in a partnership where we bring our design philosophy to your established brand while maintaining separate companies." That silenced her. My father leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes for the first time since I'd arrived. What kind of collaboration? I outlined my vision downsizing to just the original Portland location, selling the newer properties to pay down debt, returning to quality craftsmanship with a modern design aesthetic, retraining the remaining staff, and rehiring skilled woodworkers who had been let go during the expansion. Creating a sustainable business model focused on fewer better pieces rather than volume sales. The Maxwell name still has value, I explained, but only if it means quality again. We need to rebuild that reputation piece by piece. Greg, the workshop manager, was nodding enthusiastically. We still have most of the equipment from the old days, and I know several of the craftsmen would come back if we returned to real woodworking. This is all very idealistic, my mother cut in. But we have immediate financial obligations. Downsizing takes time we don't have. That's where Cassandra comes in, I said, turning to my sister. While I handle the design and production restructuring, she needs to negotiate with the creditors and suppliers. Buy us time by being completely transparent about the changes we're making. Most of these companies would rather see Maxwell's transform and survive to pay them eventually than collapse entirely. Cassandra straightened, accepting the challenge. I can do that. I've been maintaining those relationships even when things got tough. And what about us? My father asked quietly. What role do Judith and I play in this new version of our company? This was the hardest part, but necessary. Dad, you need to return to what you loved, the workshop. Be the master craftsman teaching a new generation. Leave the business decisions to Cassandra and the design direction to me. I turned to my mother. And Mom, you need to decide if you can support this new direction without undermining it. If you can use your social connections to rebuild our reputation for quality, rather than just expanding the Maxwell name. The room fell silent as my parents absorbed the implications. I was essentially asking them to step back from control of the company they had built to trust the daughters they had failed in different ways. And if we refuse, my mother asked, her voice tight. Then I get back in my car and return to Seattle, I said simply, and Maxwell's files for bankruptcy within the month. Those are the choices. The negotiation that followed was tense. My mother alternated between defensive anger and reluctant acknowledgement of reality. My father was quieter, occasionally asking questions about specific aspects of the plan. The staff, including Greg and Maria, voiced their support for my vision, which carried significant weight. By the end of the day, we had reached an agreement. It wasn't everything I had asked for. My mother insisted on maintaining some role in client relations, and my father wanted veto power over certain design elements. But the core of my plan remained intact. Maxwell's would transform, or at least try to. I called Leo again to finalize the collaboration details. My role would be designing a new core collection for Maxwell's while maintaining my position at Innovate. I would commute to Portland twice a month to oversee implementation and train the design team we would rebuild. Are you sure about this? Leo asked. These family businesses can be quicksand. I'm not doing it for the family business, I explained. I'm doing it for myself, to prove what I've always known I could do, and to close this chapter on my own terms. Then I support you completely, he said. Just don't let them pull you back into old patterns. That evening, as Marcus and I prepared to drive back to Seattle, my father approached me in the driveway. He handed me a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with intricate joinery I recognized as his personal style. What's this? I asked. Open it when you get home, he said. Just something I should have given you a long time ago. The drive back was quieter than the journey down, both of us processing the intense weekend and the new arrangement I had committed to. When we arrived at our apartment, exhausted but relieved to be home, I finally opened the box my father had given me. Inside was a set of his personal woodworking tools, the ones he had used to create his earliest pieces before Maxwell's became a business rather than a craft. Underneath them was a handwritten note. These belong with the true artisan in the family. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. 6 months later, Maxwell's fine furniture had changed dramatically. The Boise and Eugene locations had been sold, the proceeds paying off the most pressing debts. The Portland flagship store had been renovated, the showroom now featuring fewer pieces, each one showcasing true craftsmanship and my design aesthetic. My father was back in the workshop training a small team of apprentices in traditional woodworking techniques with modern applications. Cassandra had proven surprisingly effective at negotiating with creditors and rebuilding supplier relationships. Her business acumen, freed from our parents' suffocating expectations, was genuinely impressive. We had developed a good working relationship, calling each other weekly to discuss progress and challenges. My mother's journey was slower and more reluctant. She still occasionally made cutting remarks or tried to revert to old patterns of control, but even she couldn't deny that our approach was working. The business was smaller but healthier, with a sustainable path forward instead of the mirage of success they had been chasing. I maintained my life in Seattle, my relationship with Marcus growing stronger through the challenges. We were discussing marriage now, planning a future together that felt secure and joyful in a way I had never thought possible growing up in the Maxwell home. The culmination of the transformation came with the launch of the limited Maxwell Sisters collection pieces, designed by me and marketed by Cassandra, combining our strengths in a way that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. The launch event in Portland brought all the local design community and media curious about the company's dramatic turnaround. As I stood beside Cassandra explaining the inspiration behind a particularly innovative desk design, I caught sight of my parents across the room. My father was demonstrating joinery techniques to an interested group looking more animated than I had seen him in years. My mother was actually listening to a customer's needs instead of just selling them on the most expensive piece. "We did this," Cassandra said quietly, following my gaze. "We changed everything." "Not everything," I corrected, "but enough to matter." That night back in my Seattle studio, I received a call from my parents. They were still learning how to interact with me as an adult, with her own life and boundaries, but the fact that they now called instead of summoning or making demands was progress in itself. The launch was a tremendous success. My mother said, her voice containing something close to genuine pride. "Your designs are unlike anything else on the market." "Thank you," I said simply. "Will you be coming down for Christmas?" my father asked. "We'd like to have both our daughters home if that's something you'd consider." I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "We'll come for Christmas Eve," I said. "But we're spending Christmas Day with Marcus's family." "That sounds lovely," my mother said without the guilt trip I might have expected 6 months ago. After we hung up, I sat looking out at the Seattle skyline, reflecting on the journey. The wounds of my childhood hadn't magically healed. My parents hadn't transformed overnight into the supportive, loving people I had always wanted them to be. But we were finding a new way to exist in each other's lives, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. I had learned that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let it control your future. It's about setting boundaries that protect your peace while leaving space for people to show up differently if they choose to. Most importantly, I had proven to myself that my worth wasn't defined by my family's ability to recognize it. I had built a life and career I was proud of, surrounded myself with people who valued me, and found the strength to help others without sacrificing myself in the process. Sometimes helping others face their failures can be the ultimate personal victory. Not because you want to see them fail, but because it creates the opportunity for everyone to grow into something better. The Maxwell family business might never be what it once was, but the Maxwell family itself had the chance to become something. It had never been a place where both daughters could shine in their own unique light. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family while still finding ways to help them? Or return to a painful situation on your own terms? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of standing up for your worth resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of finding strength after being overlooked. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their value, regardless of whether others can see it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it, but by the courage you find to live authentically anyway.